I've got horror, I've got classics, I've got dark academia, I've got everything that you could want for spooky season. This first stack is going to be fall vibes, so like witchy books I wouldn't classify as horror, or dark academia, things that feel fall spooky vibes but aren't gory outright horror. The first one being We Ride Upon Sticks by Quan Berry. Ultimately, this is a book about a high school girls field hockey team. They make a deal with the devil, suddenly they're winning games they weren't before. This is a very, very fun book. If you have any 80s nostalgia, I highly recommend. It didn't work entirely for me, but this is still something that I will recommend to anyone who wants to pick it up. This is one of the cutest graphic novels I have ever read. We're following a deaf teenage witch who works in her grandmother's bookshop. Her love interest is a non-binary werewolf, and they get up to all kinds of shenanigans together. It is so cute and wholesome and perfect for spooky season if you want something that's not scary. One of my favorite unhinged books, All's Well by Mona Awad. You'll see this author again later. I absolutely love her writing, and this is the story of a woman who is a professor at a university. She is putting on a production of All's Well That Ends Well with her students, and they are basically like fighting back against her because they want to put on Macbeth instead. There are some unhinged speculative things that are going on in here, and I really, really loved it. Then we have Ilatsoe. I actually just finished reading this week and loved every second of it. This is the story of Ilatsoe, and she can raise the ghosts of dead animals. This book is such perfect spooky fall vibes, but still feels like a really comforting hug and a cup of warm tea. There are some really interesting conversations in here because our main characters are Native American, and part of the speculative thing that they are fighting are vampires. And there's this situation where the vampires are able to be like pushed out because we're living on stolen land, the Native American land that the English stole from them. And so they're able to like kick the vampires out because vampires have to be invited in, and because they technically own that land, that's their land, the vampires can't be on it, so they can like remove them. It's really, really interesting, and I would highly, highly recommend. Another adorable graphic novel. This is about Nimona, and she is trying to be the sidekick for a villain, and it's just a really interesting story about what it is to be a hero, what it is to be a villain, and kind of good versus evil, and I guess the camaraderie that the hero and the villain have together. It's really, really good. Nettle and Bone I actually just finished this morning. I think this is perfect spooky vibes. I would recommend any of T. Kingfisher's work, and you'll see another one of them on this list later on. This is the story of a woman who's trying to save her sister from a prince. To do that, she has to complete 3 impossible tasks: make a dog out of bone, sew a cloak out of nettles, and capture moonlight in a jar. I love the way that T. Kingfisher writes, and I think every single fall I'm just going to be reading all of her backlist. Next, we have another new favorite author of mine, which is Neil Gaiman. I loved this book. I also read The Ocean at the End of the Lane, which I would also recommend, but The Graveyard Book is my favorite, and I think the most perfect for the fall spooky season, because this is the story of a baby whose entire family is murdered. And the baby toddles up the hill to the graveyard, and the ghosts of the graveyard adopt him and raise him as one of their own. This is such a wonderful story of this boy growing up and also having these speculative powers because he's grown up in a graveyard. It's just a really wonderful time. Next, we have Initiated. This is the memoir of a witch. If you're looking for witchy vibes and you want to read a story from a person who identifies as a witch, I think this is a good option. Make sure you check trigger warnings before you read, though. If you're interested in hearing fuller thoughts on witch books, I'll link a video up here I did where I read a bunch of witch stuff. Speaking of videos that I did, I also recently did a video on dark academia. So if you want to hear in-depth thoughts on all of these dark academia books, please check that out. I'll link it up there. 2 of my favorites I read in that video are Vita Nostra and Catherine House. These 2 I'll recommend in tandem because they're both set at very isolated universities, and the students going there are completely cut off from the outside world. And Catherine House especially because they don't take anything with them. Everything they have for 3 years is given to them by Catherine House. They can't bring any photographs, music, clothes, nothing. This one gets a little speculative. There's some culty ritual stuff going on. The ending is ambiguous, so if you don't like ambiguous endings, then I would skip this one, but I absolutely loved it. It gave me the hugest dose of nostalgia from my university years. And Vita Nostra gets even crazier. The speculative way that this went just made my heart so happy. I love the way that this took parts of speech and topics that I studied in university and just took them to the extreme. This book talks a lot about fear and coercion, and it's just so good. Didn't love the ending, but really loved the book. Then we have the book that everyone is reading right now, Babel by R.F. Kuang. This is just an incredible work of art. This book talks about translation. There is a magic system in here built on translation. We're also talking about empire and colonialism and all of the ways that academia reinforces white supremacy. It's an incredible book. If you read The Poppy War and loved it, this definitely will not disappoint you. I absolutely loved it. Okay, on to thrillers. This first one I've seen people not enjoy it being classified as a thriller, so I'll just give you that disclaimer. It is so happy for you. I loved this book so much. It's about a toxic friendship. The first line is something like, if I'm gonna tell you the story of how my best friend and I ended up trying to kill each other, I should probably start with the night she asked me to be her maid of honor. It's in this like near future where everyone is obsessed with marriage, and so brides are doing all these crazy wedding charms, like having sage and garlic bouquets or crazy long trains, or having someone kidnap her bridesmaids. It's just absolutely unhinged all the way through. I know some people hate this book, but I personally loved it. Then we have The Guest List. If you're looking for a classic thriller, I absolutely devoured The Guest List. The audiobook is also incredible if you're looking for an audiobook to listen to. Again, this one is wedding themed, and we have a wedding happening on an isolated island, and all of the characters are sort of connected somehow. The end of this book was like putting the last puzzle piece together. It made my brain so happy. Absolutely incredible. Some other thrillers that I love, Samantha Downing is one of my favorites. I would recommend My Lovely Wife and For Your Own Good. My Lovely Wife is about a couple who is killing women. If you like being in the perspective of the person doing the murdering, this book is definitely for you. Same with For Your Own Good. We're following a bunch of different characters at this super prestigious prep school, and our main character is this teacher who is doing all of these things to his students. He hates his students, he hates their privilege, and he's doing all these things for their own good. I really recommend the audiobooks for both of those as well. Other books that I recommend the audiobook for are The Passengers and The One by John Mars. This one I think might be my favorite. They both read like Black Mirror episodes. We're in a near future. There's some technology piece. And this one, that technology is self-driving cars. So every car is self-driving. And one day there are, I think it's 7 people whose cars are taken over by a hacker, and a jury room, and the public has to decide who lives and who dies. Now let's talk about some horror. The Year of the Witching. This is an incredible puritanical society witch story. There are curses, there are really dark, gory things. This book does get pretty gross, just a heads up. There's a little like romance subplot that's meandering through this as well. I really recommend this if you're looking for something witchy to pick up this spooky season. Next we have Bunny by Mona Awad. I love this book. This is about a group of girls in a graduate writing program who call each other Bunny in the most saccharine way possible. I highly recommend, if you're interested in this, I would recommend checking out my Dark Academia video, because I read some of this book so you can get a taste for what this writing style is like, because it's incredibly unhinged. Our main character is kind of infiltrating / being abducted / brainwashed into this group of girls who call each other Bunny. It gets speculative. It's a wild ride. One of my favorite horrors is The Girl with All the Gifts. I love this book. There is a fungus called Ophidocordyceps, and it infects ants in our world. This book is what would happen if that fungus decided it would rather infect humans and make them cannibal zombies. So much commentary in this book about our world and what it is to be human and what it is to be a monster. This is just so freaking good. The movie, I hated. The book, incredible. The Last House on Needless Street is unlike any book that I have ever read. If you're looking for something different to kind of break up the rest of your spooky reads, I would highly recommend this one. It's got a major twist in it. I can't tell you much more than that. I did read this in a reading vlog where I kind of discussed more in-depth feelings about this, so I'll link that up there if you want to watch that. This is about the last house on Nilo Street, in which there is a teenage girl who isn't allowed outside, not after last time, a man who drinks alone in front of his TV, trying to ignore the gaps in his memory, and a house cat who loves napping and reading the Bible. Amazing. Another one of my favorite authors, Grady Hendrix. I'm going to recommend 2 books to you, Horror Store and the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires is just that. It's a Southern book club, and there's a vampire that they find and they have to slay him. There are true horror moments in this where it gets gross and scary, but it is also a lot of commentary on what it is to be a mother, and Grady Hendrix kind of said he wanted to pit Dracula against his mother, and it wasn't a fair fight. Horror Store, the book is set up to look like an IKEA catalog because it's set at Orsk, which is off-brand IKEA. Some strange things were happening in the store, so a few of the employees decide to stay overnight in the store to see what's going on, and things get real spooky real fast. If you want to see my horrified expressions while I read this book, I'll link the reading vlog that I read it in up here. Next, I have to recommend to you Slewfoot. This is another puritanical society witch tale, but this one is a lot different. I absolutely loved the conversations we were having in here about good versus evil, devil versus God. There's a creature in here who doesn't remember anything. He has amnesia, and so all throughout the book, he's trying to figure out if he's the devil, if he's a god, can he do good magic, can he only do bad magic? And there's also a woman in here who is being heavily discriminated against by her community. She's in a puritanical society. She doesn't have any rights as a woman. She's a widow, and so she has some rights, but people are trying to take her land away from her. It's a very true witch story. Many women who were widows were tried as witches because people wanted to take their land away from them, because the only way that women had landowning rights was if they were a widow, and so many of them were tried and hanged as witches so that other people could take over their land. I think this book has a lot to say about the witch narrative, so if you've read a couple of witch narratives and you're looking for something new and different, I think this is a great one to pick up. Then I have to recommend my all-time favorite book, which is House of Leaves, and I will be rereading this. I'm starting to read it today, and I'm so excited about it. It's my favorite book of all time. This is the incredibly convoluted, crazy story that would probably take me 10 minutes just to explain to you the plot, but this is definitely an approach with caution book. It's lots of commentary on academic writing, also on the horror genre, also on darkness versus light. Basically, we are reading a book that has been written by an old man who has died mysteriously, who is writing a book that is in response to a documentary that doesn't exist, and lots of academic papers that have been written about that documentary that don't exist. The documentary is about a haunted house with some non-Euclidean geometry that gets very spooky. We're also getting the footnotes and commentary from this young man who is compiling this book and possibly slowly losing his mind as he does that. A book that is similar to House of Leaves, but probably not quite as overt horror, is the Rorschach texts. I recommend this in summer a lot, but I couldn't leave it out since I'm talking about House of Leaves. This is a story in which a conceptual thought shark who eats memories is chasing you through the pages. I love this book, and it reminded me a lot of House of Leaves, so I had to include it here. Okay, now I have a stack of books that are classics and classic-like books. There are a lot of really amazing Gothic classics that I love to read during the fall season, and I'm actually planning on reading a few new ones this year, like The Picture of Dorian Gray. I also know that classics can be kind of scary and a little bit unapproachable and a little intimidating, so I want to give you some other options that are classic adjacent, and one of those is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. This is a retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe, which is a short story. This is a novella. And I really loved what T. Kingfisher did here. I love Poe's writing, and I loved this even more than the original story. Basically, the premise is we have a main character who receives a letter from their childhood friend saying that she is ill, she might be dying. They rush over to see if they can save their friend, basically, and what they uncover is a nightmare. Other really great ways to get into classics, if there's something that you want to read but maybe don't feel like they are for you, or want something a little bit less intimidating are graphic novels that are inspired by or adapted from the original classics. So I have two to recommend to you. The first one is Victor LaValle's Destroyer, and this is a retelling of Frankenstein, which is one of my favorite classics. I recommend both of these. This is a more overtly science fiction sort of retelling of Frankenstein, deals with mother-son dynamic in a really compelling way. I would highly recommend this if you maybe are thinking about reading Frankenstein and want to attack it from a different angle, or if you love Frankenstein, I think you'll really love this too. I'll show you some of the art style. Really love this one. Of course, I'm also going to be recommending Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This is the story of Victor Frankenstein, who creates a creature out of cadaver bodies and is so horrified about what he's created that he shuns the creature, and that comes back to bite him in the butt for sure. This is an amazing, amazing story about what it is to be human and the difference between being a human and being a monster. It is definitely not like the green guy with the bolt through his neck sort of Frankenstein imagery that we have today. This is a really, really thoughtful book, and Mary Shelley is an absolute icon. The other graphic novel I have to recommend is Kindred, and this is inspired by Octavia Butler's story by the same name. And I will definitely be picking up the full-length novel soon because I love this graphic novel so much. We're following our main character, who is thrown back in time to a plantation in the South under slavery. Really compelling story. The art style is amazing. I will show you. It's just very, very colorful, and I really, really loved this. And finally, our true classics. I have to recommend Crime and Punishment. This is the story of Raskolnikov, who commits a murder, which he thinks is totally fine for him because he's a very smart person and he's allowed to murder this specific person because he has his reasons. Things do not go as planned, and he starts to unravel mentally. If you read The Secret History and you liked the people having mental breakdowns after murdering someone, I think it's done better in here, and I would highly recommend this. Then we have The Road by Cormac McCarthy. I love this book, and I think fall time is a perfect time to really unpack humans at their worst. The people that our characters encounter during this are showing you the entire breadth of human behavior in the best and worst ways. We're following a father and a son who are walking down the road in this wasteland. Basically, something has happened which we don't know what it is, and they are basically just trying to survive. I love, 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 love this book, and hopefully we'll be rereading it soon. Finally, one of my favorite authors of all time, Shirley Jackson. I have two to show you. The first one is We Have Always Lived in the Castle. This is only 146 pages long, and all of them are incredible. I love Shirley Jackson's writing. This is the story of a family, and something has happened and we don't really know what it is at the beginning, but we're trying to figure out if these whispers from the townspeople are true, if there's something sinister that has gone on. Our main character has this black cat named Jonas, and it's basically this cover. It's the townspeople who are watching these two sisters and trying to figure out what's going on in this house. So, so, so good. One of my favorite books of all time, Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. If you're trying to get into horror, I think this was one of the first horror books that I really read. Gothic horror is so good if you're just trying to foray into the horror genre. If you've watched the Netflix series The Haunting of Hill House, this is nothing like that. That was inspired by this story, but does not follow the same characters at all. We have a group of people who have showed up to Hill House to basically determine whether or not it is haunted, and they get a little bit more than they've bargained for. The way that the house is personified in here is so good. I absolutely love this book. Again, it's short, it's under 200 pages. Shirley Jackson's writing really packs a punch. If you read one thing from this list, please let it be this one. I really think that The Haunting of Hill House is for everyone. And then after you finish it, you have a whole Netflix series full of creepy ghosts and jump scares if you want to be in this world longer. Okay, that is everything that I have to recommend to you for spooky season. Please give me your spooky season recommendations in the comments. I would love to fill my TBR with your favorite spooky books. Otherwise, I post every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern. I would love to see you here in the future. If you liked this video, please make sure to give it a like. And if you want to stick around and see me reading some more spooky things this fall season, like rereading my favorite book of all time, The House of Leaves, I would highly recommend that you subscribe so you don't miss that video. Otherwise, I will see you next Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern. Bye.